The knife didn't even pause when I screamed. 1 second. I was standing between my son and the raised hand of a man who called himself family, and the next, I was staring at blood pouring down my arm, the skin of my palm split open like paper. My father-in-law didn't even blink. His eyes were calm, focused, as if hurting me wasn't personal, just necessary. Like cutting meat from a bone, and the worst part? My husband was right there, and he did nothing. Before we continue, please, write in the comments which country you're watching this video from. Enjoy the story, it on a Wednesday. Funny how you remember details like that when your world turns upside down. I had just picked up my 6-year-old Mason from school. He was still wearing his Spider-Man backpack and grinning from ear to ear because he got a star sticker for helping his classmate. We lived with my in-laws, Paul and Linda, just outside a small town in Ohio. The house was big but cold, like everything inside belonged to them, and we were just squatting. My husband Josh had lost his job a few months back, and we were trying to get back on our feet. At least that's what I told people when they asked, but the truth was, Paul didn't like me. Never had. He thought I was too loud, too opinionated, too alive. I wasn't raised to tiptoe around men, and Paul, he expected women to be silent unless spoken to. I tried to keep the peace, I really did, but there was always this tension humming in the walls. Something ready to snap. That afternoon, as soon as we walked in, Mason bumped into the edge of the hallway table. A vase rocked and shattered on the floor. He gasped, frozen, his eyes wide with guilt. Then came the footsteps. Paul's boots thudded down the stairs like thunder. His voice boomed through the house before he even saw what happened. "What the hell was that?" Mason opened his mouth to speak, but I already stepped forward. "It was an accident," I said. But Paul shoved past me, grabbing Mason by the shoulder so hard the kid stumbled. "You little brat," he growled, raising his hand. My body moved before I even thought about it. I stepped between them and shouted, "Stop hitting my son!" And that's when everything blurred. Paul's face changed. It was like a mask slipped off. No more pretending. He wasn't yelling now. He was quiet, focused, like a butcher getting ready for work. He turned, walked calmly into the kitchen, and pulled something from the drawer. A knife, I thought it was. To scare me, to intimidate. It wasn't. He stepped forward. I threw my hand out in instinct, trying to block whatever he was planning, and the blade sliced clean across my palm. Not a quick nick, a deep, searing cut, I screamed. Dropped to my knees. Blood hit the tile like red paint. Josh stood in the doorway. Frozen. I looked up at him, begging silently for him to do something, anything, but he just stared. His father said coldly, "You don't talk to me like that in my house. Not you. Not the boy. This is how discipline works." Linda stood near the sink. Her hands trembled, but she didn't say a word. Just turned away like she couldn't see what was happening. I wrapped my bleeding hand in a dish towel and grabbed Mason, who was crying so hard he could barely breathe. "We're leaving," I said through my teeth. Paul didn't stop me. But he didn't look scared either. Just smug, like he knew I had nowhere to go, and maybe he was right. We drove away with blood on my shirt and silence in the car. But I wasn't running away this time. I was planning. The hospital waiting room smelled like bleach and old tears. A nurse wrapped my hand in gauze while Mason sat beside me, curled into himself, trying not to cry again. The cut was deep. I needed stitches, 7 of them. But that wasn't what hurt the most. What hurt was the look on my son's face, the fear in his eyes, like he was still waiting for the next slap, the next shout, the next knife. He didn't understand that we were supposed to be safe now. While the nurse worked, she asked quietly, "Do you want to file a report? We have to note it as an injury caused by another person, especially with a weapon involved." I nodded. I didn't even hesitate. Something inside me had clicked when that knife tore through my skin. A voice I had buried for years screamed to life. This is not okay. And it never was. Josh finally showed up an hour later. I saw him walk in through the automatic doors, hands in his pockets, face pale. I expected regret, panic, something, but he sat down across from me like this was just another late-night inconvenience. "You okay?" he asked, eyes flicking to my wrapped hand. "I'm filing a report," I said. "Paul used a knife. Mason saw everything. Josh didn't flinch. He just sighed. You know it wasn't like that. He wasn't aiming for you. I blinked. He had a knife, Josh. He cut me, in front of your son. Josh looked down at the floor. You shouldn't have yelled at him. That's when I realized there would be no rescue. No apology. No ally. Josh had already chosen his side, and it wasn't ours. The next morning, I took Mason and went to the police station. I gave my statement, described the incident in detail, even showed them the bloody towel I had kept in my purse. The officer took notes, nodding, asking questions. Then he said something that chilled me. Your husband already came in this morning. He told us a different story. My mouth went dry. What kind of story? The officer glanced at his notes. Said you were hysterical, that you'd gotten angry and slammed your hand on a drawer, that you made it all up to start drama with your in-laws? I couldn't breathe. That's not true. I believe you, the officer said gently. But this complicates things, especially since it happened in their home and your husband's backing their version. My head spun. So that was the plan. Paint me as unstable. Erase the knife. Erase the scream. Erase the fact that my son almost got hit again. I walked out of the station feeling like the ground was crumbling under my feet. Back at the motel I had scraped together money for, Mason sat on the bed, coloring quietly. He had drawn a picture of our old house, our tiny apartment from before we moved in with Josh's parents. The sun was shining in the picture, there were flowers, and 3 stick figures. Me, him, and Josh. Why is Daddy frowning? I asked. Softly. Mason didn't look up, because he didn't help. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes I saw Paul's face, calm, controlled, like he'd done this before. Like this wasn't new. What scared me more was the silence of the people around him. Linda turning away, Josh defending him, even the police treading lightly. This wasn't just one man's cruelty. This was a system of family that protected him. I needed more than my word. I needed proof. Something no one could twist or deny, and I knew where to start. The kitchen drawer. There had to be blood on that knife, or the handle, or the floor. Something Paul hadn't cleaned. The house had cameras. Security ones. Paul bragged about them every time a package got delivered. If they hadn't erased the footage yet, it could show everything, but I couldn't go back there. Not without help. So the next day, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. My older sister. We'd had a falling out when I married Josh. She had warned me, told me to run the moment she met his family. I didn't listen, but now I needed her more than ever, and when I told her everything, she didn't hesitate. I'm coming to get you, she said, and we're not just going to survive this. We're going to bury them with the truth. My sister pulled up outside the motel just after midnight. No questions, no judgment. Just her, standing there in sweatpants and a hoodie, arms open wide like the last few years hadn't happened. I broke down the second she hugged me. Mason, half asleep in the back seat, clung to his stuffed dinosaur as we drove. My sister didn't say much until we got to her apartment. 2-bedroom walk-up with second-hand furniture and a flickering hallway light. But it felt like paradise compared to where we'd been. When Mason finally fell asleep on her couch, she turned to me and said, "We're going to get him, and your husband, nailed to the wall. I promise you that." I told her everything again, but slower this time. Every insult, every threat, every bruise they tried to blame on clumsiness. She didn't flinch, just took notes. What about the cameras? She asked. There should be footage. But I'm not going back there alone. She raised an eyebrow. You won't be? The next evening, while Josh was at work, he had picked up a night shift to clear his head. My sister drove us back to the neighborhood I swore I'd never return to. I wore a hoodie and gloves to hide my bandaged hand. She parked 2 blocks away, and we walked through backyards, slipping between fences like we were teenagers sneaking out. Paul and Linda were home. The lights were on, but the curtains were drawn. We crouched near the side of the house, close to the basement window. That's when I noticed it. The side gate was unlocked. I looked at her. She looked at me. Neither of us spoke. We moved quietly through the backyard, staying low, every step a heartbeat. I knew exactly where the security DVR was kept. Paul's little setup in the garage, where he stored tools and old boxes full of junk. The garage had a side door. Unlocked. Slipped inside while my sister kept watch. Heart pounding so loud I was sure someone would hear it. The smell of oil and rust hit me like a wall. But there it was, the monitor, the recorder, the blinking red light, still on. I scanned the dates. There it was, 2 nights ago. The exact time we came home from school. The sound wasn't great, but the video was crystal clear. Mason dropping the vase. Paul storming in. Me stepping between them, the knife, the blood. I could hardly breathe. My hands shook as I yanked out the flash drive Paul always used for backups. He had once told me he kept them just in case the police ever needed proof some idiot tried to rob us. Guess what, Paul? Now it's your turn. I tucked the flash drive into my hoodie pocket and slipped back out the door. We were almost to the fence when I heard it. Hey! A voice from the back porch. Linda. She stepped into the yard, phone in her hand, panic in her voice. Who's there? My sister grabbed my hand and we ran. Full sprint through the bush, scraping our legs, hurdling garden decorations like we were being chased by wolves. We didn't stop until we reached the car. I looked back once. Linda hadn't followed, but I knew we just lit the match. Back at my sister's place, I watched the video again. This time slower, frame by frame. It was all there, the threat, the knife, the cut. The moment Mason screamed. My sister uploaded it to a cloud drive, backed it up on a second USB, and emailed a copy to my lawyer friend from college who owed her a favor. By morning I had a response. This changes everything. He said we had enough now to push the police for charges. That the department wouldn't be able to ignore footage this clear. Especially not with a minor witness and medical records to match. But he also warned me, they're going to come after you harder now, especially your husband. And he was right. By noon I had 10 missed calls from Josh, 5 from Paul. The voicemails weren't begging, they were threats. You think this is over? Paul's voice growled in one. You're just making it worse for that boy. I stared at the screen, hand trembling. My sister took the phone, deleted the message, and said, "They're scared." That's a good thing. But fear wasn't enough. I didn't want them scared. I wanted them accountable. And I was about to give them the one thing they couldn't escape. A courtroom. The courtroom was colder than I imagined. Not in temperature, but in feeling. Cold walls. Cold faces. Cold justice. Like everyone had seen too much and cared too little, but I cared. Because the man who sliced my palm with a kitchen knife was sitting just 20 feet away, wearing a button-up shirt like he hadn't shattered my bones and scarred my child. Smirking. Like none of this would touch him, Paul, and beside him, my husband, Josh. He didn't even glance at me. Just sat stiff and silent, as if this wasn't about his son. As if loyalty to his father meant more than protecting the child we made together. It was like he'd already chosen which version of the story he believed, but I had something no one else in that room could deny. The footage. My lawyer, Kendra, stepped forward first. Come, controlled deadly with her words. She played the video in full, pausing right at the moment the knife flashed across the screen. There was no shouting, no chaos. Just Paul, holding a blade, me, shielding Mason, the slice. The blood. The jury watched in silence. Even the judge leaned forward. Paul's lawyer tried to object. Claimed the footage was stolen. Claimed it was edited, but the timestamps didn't lie, and neither did the audio Mason's small voice. Crying, "Mommy," right after the cut. My hands were sweating, my knees locked. I couldn't look at Paul. I couldn't look at Josh. I looked at my son instead, sitting outside the courtroom with my sister, coloring quietly in the hallway waiting area. He testified the day before, just a few words through tears. Grandpa hurt Mommy with a knife. She was saving me. That was all he said, and it was enough. The real twist came on day 3. Josh took the stand. I didn't know what he would say. I didn't trust him. But some part of me, some tiny flickering part, hoped he would finally do the right thing. He didn't. I didn't see the knife, he said. My stomach dropped. I think she overreacted. My dad was trying to discipline Mason. She got in the way. The injury was probably an accident. Kendra stood slowly. Are you saying your wife intentionally injured herself? Josh hesitated. I'm saying she has a history of overreacting. The jury shifted. The judge raised an eyebrow, and I realized Josh wasn't trying to protect Paul. He was trying to destroy me. Maybe because I embarrassed him. Maybe because I left. Maybe because he couldn't stand the thought of losing, whatever the reason. He was now part of the machine trying to tear me down. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Kendra stood up, walked over to the monitor, and played. The video again this time, focusing on Josh in the background, his figure, his frozen stance. The look on his face when Paul raised the knife. Does this look like someone who didn't see what happened? She asked. Silence. Josh looked down. Didn't answer. Then came the final witness, a neighbor, an older woman, maybe late 60s, who lived across the street. I barely knew her. Hadn't seen her in months, but she had seen everything from her kitchen window. She testified that Paul had always been aggressive with the boy. That she'd called the cops once, years ago, after hearing yelling through the walls, that night. She had seen Paul storm into the house after the vase broke, and then she saw me walk out with Mason-bleeding. She took photos of the towel in my hand. She had them printed, cousinly. It wasn't just my word anymore. It was real. It was witnessed. It was documented by the time we rested our case. The room felt different. No more smirks. No more silence. Paul looked like stone. Josh had his head in his hands, and Linda? She didn't even show up that day. I sat with my hands folded, staring straight ahead, refusing to cry. I had already cried enough. This wasn't about tears anymore. It was about truth. The courtroom was silent when the jury filed back in. 12. Faces all unreadable. My heart pounded in my ears so loud I almost couldn't hear the judge speak. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman stood. We have, Your Honor. Time froze. I gripped the edge of my seat, every muscle locked. Every breath stuck in my throat. I glanced toward the hallway. Mason was out there, still drawing in his notebook with my sister by his side. He didn't know what was about to happen, but I did. This was our moment. Or it wasn't, and if it wasn't, I didn't know what came next. The foreman cleared his throat. For the charge of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, we find the defendant, Paul Matthews, guilty. I didn't hear the rest. All I could do was cover my mouth as the tears came, not the kind that choke you with pain, but the kind that tastes like air after drowning. My body felt weightless. I looked up at Kendra, and she gave me a small, firm nod, the kind of nod that says, we did it. They believed you. Paul didn't speak. Didn't cry. Didn't even blink. He just sat there, staring at the desk in front of him like none of it mattered. Like even now, he still thought he'd find a way out. He wouldn't. The judge ordered him taken into custody immediately. No bail. Sentencing would be held the following month. But for now, Paul Matthews, the man who called my child trash, who raised his hand like a king delivering punishment, was finally in handcuffs. And that was justice. But justice, it turns out, comes in layers, after. Court. Josh followed me outside. I saw him coming, shoulders hunched, guilt on his face. Wait, he called out. I stopped. I don't know why. Maybe I just needed to hear whatever excuse he thought would make this okay. I didn't mean to lie, he said. I didn't know what to do. He's my dad. I stared at him. And Mason is your son. He looked down. I know. No, I said coldly. You don't? You stood by while your father hurt your child and cut open your wife's hand? You saw the blood and stayed silent? That's not confusion. That's a choice. He started. Crying like that would fix it. I'm filing for full custody, I said, voice steady. You won't see Mason unless a court allows it? And even then, not until he's ready. He opened his mouth to argue, but I was already walking away. That chapter? Closed. Asterisk weeks passed. Paul was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Asterisk the footage. The witnesses. The history, it all piled up into a sentence no amount of smugness could erase. The judge called him a threat to the emotional and physical safety of others. His record would be permanent. His title as grandfather? Burned away. But the story didn't end in that courtroom. It ended on a quiet evening, weeks later on the porch of my sister's apartment. Mason was sitting on a blanket in the grass, playing with toy cars. He laughed, a full, honest, from the belly. Kind of laugh I hadn't heard in months. He was safe. His art had returned, no longer full of fear or shadows. His drawings now showed trees, sunshine, and rocket ships. And our little family, me, him, and my sister standing together, asterisk, I sat down beside him, watching the sunset, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time, peace, for the first time. The echoes of Paul's voice didn't follow me into the night. The smell of that cold house, the blood on the tiles, the weight of my silence, they were all gone now, replaced by something stronger, a promise I had made, asterisk, they'll never hurt you again, and I kept it. They say family is forever, asterisk, but I've learned the truth. Blood doesn't make you family. Protection does. Love does, asterisk, and if I had to pick between peace and loyalty ever again, I'd choose peace. I'd choose my son every single time. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Stay safe, and never stay silent.